The second one also described Libya's security as, in simple terms, a mess. So this memo wanted you to approve $20 million to be given to the Libyan government to bolster its own.
Could you tell me what tab that is on the materials that you have referred to?
The first one is, I believe, is it 33 and 34? 33 and 34.
Thank you.
I apologize. So you received those two memos. The second one also described Libya's security in simple terms as a mess, and it was then that you were approached about approving this $20 million that we've referred to as the contingency fund, $20 million that would have gone to the Libyan government to bolster their own security there in country. And then, in fact, a few days later, you approved that $20 million. And I'm going to get back to that in a minute, but I want to circle back based on those two memos to some questions that my colleague, Mr. Pompeo, asked about the 1998 ARB. You had talked about in that line of questioning that you, in fact, had made the decision to close some embassies based on the premise that the 1998 ARB recommended the Secretary of State should personally review the security situation. You made a distinction between whether the walls should be 10 foot high versus whether or not it was a highly vulnerable situation. And so I wanted to ask you, when I was listening to that, knowing that I was going to address these August 17th memos, I wanted to ask you, when you were looking at these two memos on August 17th, one said their security was one in disarray, and the other said they paint a picture of a country in chaos. And I wanted to just ask you, in your opinion, as Secretary of State that had closed embassies, whether those references to the security situation in Libya would amount to one as highly vulnerable per your own words.
Congressman, I want to answer your question, but I think we need the right tabs.
Excuse me, 8 and 32. I apologize.
Thank you very much. Let me take a look at those, 8 and 32. On August 17th, there was a memo from Beth Jones, the acting Secretary of State, describing a spike in violence and characterizing it as perhaps a new normal. It is very clearly something that we were following, as I have said throughout the hearing today. It said that the International Committee of the Red Cross had withdrawn personnel from Benghazi and Misrata, but continued to work in the rest of Libya. It also pointed out that there is a lack of effective security, and that the transition, the kind of transition we wanted to see for the people of Libya, and particularly in Benghazi, was not as forthcoming from the Libyans themselves. I think that the description here is certainly something that we were aware of, and a list of recent violence in Libya is something we were aware of. And the ongoing monitoring of the situation in Libya is something we took very seriously. I can tell you that these kinds of assessments were not uncommon for other places, high threat, dangerous, unstable places, even war zones, where we were also operating.
Would you categorize those type of descriptions as highly vulnerable?
Well, I think that, again, there was no recommendation based on any of the assessments, not from our State Department experts, not from the intelligence community, that we should abandon either Benghazi or Tripoli.
Right, and I understand that. And Secretary Clinton, you know, I guess one of the questions that we need answered is, you were a huge advocate for our presence there to begin with. What prevented you from making the decision based on the knowledge that you had from these memos about the deteriorating security situation. What prevented you as Secretary of State from making that decision on your own?
Well, Congresswoman, I took into consideration a wide variety of factors. There were a number of places where violence would spike, and we would have to make a decision. At this point, what we were trying to do was work with the Libyan authorities. That's what the August 17th memo from Deputy Secretary Nides refers to. We were trying to provide additional security assistance so that the Libyans could do more to assist themselves. And, you know, it is the case that in the world we're in today, there are a lot of places that are dangerous. Violence goes up and goes down. Part of what Acting Assistant Secretary Beth Jones was referencing in this memo is this is a new normal? And the Secretary does personally oversee the decision to order departure or shut down posts. And it is important to take that ultimate responsibility very much to heart, which I did. But I think that there was no recommendation to do that. Okay. And again, I was following it, I was watching it, I was trying to, you know, make a very well-reasoned analysis. But I was also listening to the people who were both on the ground and with a lot of experience, who had served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, other places like that, and there was no recommendation.
Secretary Clinton, what I'm trying to make a distinction between is the decisions that you made with respect to Benghazi and decisions that your staff made with respect to Benghazi. But I'm already running out of time, so I do want to get back to that $20 million that we talked about. On numerous occasions, the finger has been pointed at Congress for not properly funding the security, or the funding not being available for the security requests. Yet I find it curious that you were able to find $20 million to support increased security forces in Libya, yet we weren't able to find money to support your own people on the ground. And, you know, particularly in light of the fact that Mrs. Lamb said that funding wasn't an issue. So I think that it's been a little bit misleading to say it's Congress's fault, but then also it's worth pointing out that there was $20 million found for Libyan security and no dollars found to support increased security for our own people.
Well, as I know you're aware, Congresswoman, the Congress sets spending levels in categories of spending. And as I said earlier, the requests for diplomatic security to do exactly what you are referencing were underfunded. They were underfunded continuously. I am pleased that following the tragedy at Benghazi, we began to get more support from the Congress. But one of the funds that is very important when you're actually talking about an American presence in the country goes back to questions that I was being asked by Congresswoman Duckworth. If we can help build up the Libyan security forces, they are the host country. It is their responsibility to protect diplomatic posts. So I don't see these as unconnected, but it is true that we spent money for diplomatic security out of what the Congress appropriated for diplomatic
Secretary
security.
Clinton, Charlene Lamb said herself it wasn't a budget issue. So do you take issue with that statement?
Well, I can only tell you that our analysis of the underfunding of security for our diplomatic posts was very much in line with what I have just said, that we asked for money in this administration in the earlier years, and we were underfunded. And so I can tell you that it would have been very helpful to have more money for diplomatic security, and I want to thank the Congress for upping the amount of money that went to diplomatic security, working with the Defense Department to get more Marines deployed to more posts, and the other actions that have been taken post-Benghazi.
We appreciate that, although, again, I really think there's a conflict between Charlene Lamb's statement and some that you've made about that. But real quickly, Mr. Chairman, I want to run through one quick timeline and make an observation. On August 17th, you received a memo on the deteriorating security in Libya. The same day, you were asked to give $20 million to the Libyan